In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting virtually. The Public Works Commission is conducting this meeting on January 13th, 2021 at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Zoom platform and in accordance with the town's policy directive and guidelines issued April 1st, 2020 and amended on May 7th. I ask that all Public Works Commissioners, town staff, and presenters activate their video and mute their microphone unless they have something to say or are participating in committee dialogue. For members of the public, when I open the meeting to public comment, in order to be recognized, please use the raised hand option on Zoom or use *9 by phone. If you are recognized, please state your name and address. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing at the town's website. I, James Terry, hereby call this meeting to order. All commissioners' votes will be taken by roll call. We will start with an attendance call of all commissioners. When I announce your name, please reply. James Terry, present. Andrew Boardman.
Here.
David DeLong.
Present.
Jeff Vassar.
Oh, you're muted.
Present.
Thank you. Casey Winslow.
Here.
Okay. On our agenda today, we are going to be reviewing minutes from our meeting in November. We're going to be looking at our forward calendar, and then we have some action and discussion items, specifically 13B Commonwealth Avenue, a wastewater capacity appeal, private ways winter maintenance update for the commissioners, general fund capital planning preliminary work, the director's report, and then comments from commissioners and the public. So to get us started, we have minutes for the meeting of November 24th, 2020. Are there any comments from the commissioners? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the minutes?
I so move. Andrew Boardman.
Is there a second?
Second, Casey Winslow.
Thank you. Okay. A roll call for approval. James Terry, yes. Andrew Boardman,
Yes.
David DeLong,
Yes.
Jeff Vassar,
Yes.
Casey Winslow.
Aye.
Thank you. We also have the review and approval of executive minutes at that same meeting on November 24th, 2020. At this time, the minutes will not be released to the public. Are there any comments or revisions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I move. David DeLong.
Is there a second?
Andrew Boardman, second.
Thank you. All those in favor? James Terry, yes. Andrew Boardman,
Yes.
David DeLong,
Yes.
Jeff Vassar,
I'm going to abstain since I had to leave early.
thank you. Casey Winslow.
Aye.
Okay, the vote on that was a 4 in affirmative with 1 abstention. Okay. Our calendar coming up, it appears that next month we will be looking at wastewater and solid waste and recycling subscription. Rate hearing. Is it, will we actually have the rate hearing next time? Okay.
Yes, yes, we
So
will.
things are moving along quickly then.
Mhm.
And then the following month, we will have a roads program preview, enterprise fund capital planning update. Then in April, the roads program public meeting. And in May, water sewer rate public hearing and preparation for town meeting, which is going to be in June. Are there any questions or any other changes that you're aware of, Alan?
No, again, I mentioned some of these items are tentative. I think what's, when we have rate hearings, there's generally a reason based on trying to get the rate set and changed. So those generally are pretty rigid. With the town meeting that has been postponed till or deferred till June, it gives us a little more time to talk some of the budget related issues. I can tell you that the warrant opens on February 27th. So we'll be working in concert with the rest of the town, departments on, some of those kind of shared schedules. But for the most part, that's a framework, for the board to be aware of. And
Okay.
some of the people who've been around for a while, you notice that there's a cycle, and you'll probably see some of these things routinely through year to year.
So do any of the commissioners know that they're not going to be able to make the February 10th meeting? Okay, in that case, I think we'll move forward with that as our tentative address. I think the next item on our agenda is a discussion of 13B Commonwealth Avenue, an appeal to the municipal sewer design review. Alan, you want to kick this off?
Sure. We have a policy in place, a reminder to some of the new commissioner member, or a reminder to existing commissioners and to the new members, wastewater capacity, the utilization of the municipal wastewater services is finite. And because of that, we have a long-standing program as far as managing a fairly limited resource so that it can achieve a lot of goals for the community, specifically environmental protection. That's one of the main reasons we have a collection system and wastewater treatment plant. It also allows us to accommodate some economic growth and development. And we are regulated through permits, both federal and state, where we need to monitor and control both flow and quality. Because of that, over the past 20 plus years, there's been a very strategic approach to managing, what capacity we have available without upsetting our permit constraints. Back in 2013, the Public Works Commission determined that any large new requests or changes in use for a site that does have service or fronts the municipal sewer, if they exceed 1,000 gallons per day based on Title V design flow, and that's the standard in the industry to sort of dictate primarily peak flow from a residential compound or commercial facility. It's over 1,000 gallons per day. The board wants to participate in reviewing. It's not just simply an administrative, yes, you have frontage and we're going to accept it. And for that reason, it has to meet some tenets that the board and the community have identified as sort of essential. In this case, I'll take it that the commission has had a chance to look at the memo that was provided, gives a little background, but the primary focus today is for the proponent, which is 13B Commonwealth Avenue LLC, represented by Patrick Cleary, who's on. It's their job to explain how this project kind of serves the community's best interest. It's a pretty high bar to achieve, and only when the packet looks complete would we advance it to the commission for consideration. So with that said, I'm going to have Patrick walk you through a little bit of the background of this particular project. And Patrick, I can put, I will post the presentation for you if you want to take it from here.
Wonderful.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so. Okay, can you see on your screen the site plan, sort of aerial photo?
I can.
Yes.
Okay, great. So Patrick, why don't you take it from here?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alan. My name is Patrick Cleary. I am one of the current owners and one of the original developers of Brookside Square and 13B Commonwealth Avenue in West Concord Village. Alan, we lost the aerial.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what.
There we go. I have multiple screens.
Just to orient everyone, I thought I'd put together a quick aerial. And you can see in the aerial, close to the #1 circle, is the Brookside Square project in West Concord. #2 is the outline of the 13B Commonwealth Ave property that we're talking about tonight. And then I can detail #3 and 4 as I kind of bring you through some of the history. But I'm here to talk to you tonight as part of an effort to purchase 2,645 gallons per day for a building which would be located at that 13B Commonwealth Avenue property. There's a bit of a backstory to this building that I tried to detail in my letter to the committee, but I thought I would attempt to provide a brief outline of that for you now, and then I'm available to answer any questions that may come up through the presentation. But 13B Commonwealth Avenue is a critical part of the overall Brookside Square project. We began the approval process for Brookside Square way back almost 11 years ago by now in 2010. We designed it to accommodate 8 or 9 very specific goals of the then recently completed West Concord master plan. I tried to outline those goals in my letter, but some of those goals included improving the natural resource and the access to the natural resource of the Neshoba Brook, upgrading what were recognized at that time as 2 underutilized properties at the heart of the village, meaning 50 Beharrell Street and 13B Commonwealth Ave, as well as enlivening the village with transit-oriented mixed-use smart growth development. Another major goal of the West Concord Master Plan at that time was to improve the traffic congestion and the safety of Commonwealth Avenue around the intersection of the commuter rail parking lot. For decades, the only way in and out of the station was at the little number 4 on the aerial, right next to where the gates come over Commonwealth Ave across the track. And this sole curb cut could be a very harrowing way to get in and out of the station in the morning and the evening hours at what is one of the most highly used stations for the surrounding region. The master plan sought to bring a connection road from the rear of the commuter rail station through 50 Beharrell Street, which is that number 3, out to the Commonwealth Avenue frontage where 13B is located. And this location for the loop road would allow for a safer traffic movement away from the tracks for anyone who might be traveling east and might be able to take a left out of the site and queue up at a safe distance from the track, or they'd be able to take a very simple, safe right-hand turn out of 13B and continue to points west in West Concord or travel on to Route 2. In order to accomplish this, we were tasked with actually buying 13B and incorporating it into the Brookside project. It took us well over a year to negotiate 13B's purchase, but we were able to do so. A couple of years later, we received site plan approval for not only the 74-unit, 36,000 square foot mixed use project at 50 Beharrell Street, but we also got site plan approval and special permit for a 1-story, 6,750 square foot retail building right on the road at 13B. For that smaller building, at that time, we were able to secure 950 gallons per day of sewer to service that building. Although Alan has informed me recently that that allotment has since expired, as it apparently was not paid for and we haven't had to use it. We were very focused on the leasing of the substantial amount of commercial square footage at Brookside. And that kept us focused for a couple of years. But in 2017, we turned our attention back to 13B and the small retail building that was approved. As part of that initial approval, we needed to bring the architectural design back to the planning board for sign off, but only after working with the West Concord Advisory Committee on the look and aesthetic of the building. So in 2017, we presented in front of the advisory committee. And at that time, what is up on the screen was not the design. The design was for a 1-story retail building. And we were made very well aware of the fact that this 1-story building was not welcome, nor was it acceptable to this group. To say that we were forcefully and passionately pushed by the West Concord Advisory Committee, and then later by the West Concord Junction Cultural District Committee, which got very involved in the process, to do something much grander for West Concord and for this location in particular, would be an understatement to make that statement. We have spent the last 3 years designing and redesigning some more this project. The latest design that Alan has on the screen has been based off of the look of a building that today houses the Salt Box Kitchen, which you may be familiar with in Concord, but which we discovered back at the turn of the 1900s was a substantial 3-story building that had some performance space on the second floor, in which tragically burned down. The top 2 stories of the building burned down and was redesigned as the 1-story building that's there today. That was always presented to us as something that was very unique to the character of West Concord and something that was worthy, a design that was worthy of a location such as 13B. So what we've tried to do is create a modern interpretation of that older building. And fortunately, this latest design has gotten enthusiastic support from the various stakeholders within the community, notably the West Concord Advisory Committee and the Junction Cultural District Committee, as well as many residents who participated in the long process. This past December, we received unanimous recommendation from the Planning Board and unanimous approval at the Zoning Board of Appeals for this project. And the approvals is for 6 2-bedroom residential units and 2 3-bedroom residential units for a total of 8 across the 2nd and 3rd floors, as well as 5,250 square feet of retail on the 1st floor. Throughout the last 3 years, at each presentation that I gave to the various committees, I did make it clear that in order to move away from the original 6,750 square foot building, I would need more than the 950 gallons per day that had been previously approved. And I was assured at each step, by the various stakeholders that I would have their support in this effort. And that's really why we are here today. So I am very respectfully requesting a gallon allotment of 2,645 gallons per day, in line with the Title V regulations for 2 and 3-bedroom units, as well as the commercial units. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have, and I very much appreciate everyone's consideration.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there questions or issues from the commissioners?
No, I just had one question related to parking. Is the existing lot large enough to accommodate the planned use for the needs of the tenants and those kind of things, or is there additional parking that's going to be put on the lot as well?
Sure, great question. So as part of the approval, we sought relief from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So what we will have is a parking ratio that is in line with the ratio that was approved for Brookside, which is 1.5 parking spaces per unit on the residential side, and then 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet on the commercial side. And the combination of those 2 components comes to 33 parking spaces, which if you were to go out to the site today, you would see 27 parking spaces currently already built. And we're going to add 6 parking spaces to that
So it's not a huge difference for what we've got there.
No, and then the other great thing is, to consider is that there is a shared parking, with the Brookside Square project, which I believe has 160, spaces on their lot. So everything's been incorporated with all those calculations.
That's great.
Jeff,
Thank you, Jim. And Patrick, thank you for the presentation. It's very crisp and clear, and you answered a couple of the questions I had. It's more of a question for Alan. What is the extent of sewer service for existing parcels, buildings in the West Concord area? Are there any buildings in this area that are not on the sewer system? And how far out do you need to go from the hub to get off of the sewer system?
Right. So in essence, I don't have a map readily available, but for the most part, a third of the town is served by municipal sewer.
Yep.
Maybe up to 40% at this point. And the central areas like West Concord and Concord Center are the more dense areas are likely served through municipal sewer. We have identified future expansion if and when all the cards lined up, as far as there was the economics that would allow for that. Excuse me 1 second. But at this point, if you have frontage to sewer, and this does, that's where the capacity or change in use is really the only control that we put on those properties, and it's vetted just like you're vetting today. So the existing capacity at the wastewater treatment plant is a rolling monthly average of 1.2 million gallons a day. When we started this planning process, we had reached 80% of that capacity. That was back in the late 90s. And that's what initiated a comprehensive wastewater master plan, so we could demonstrate to the regulators that we were going to work within our existing budget. And fortunately, we've been able to expand, limited, but some expansion for residential purposes. We've accommodated some infill. It's been controlled, like we're, this particular process. But we are at about 1 million. Well, presently we're close to 900,000 gallons a day. We've actually dropped a little bit, but that's because we've been doing some rehabilitation, repair of our system, which is very important. But we're really working with a pretty tight budget, and that's why it's managed. I will say, for general interest, the ability to connect to municipal sewer is no longer just an economic interest from a developer, because the costs are pretty significant, because they are paying for future expansion and growth if we do trip our permit. As a result, it's more of some areas are better served with municipal sewer when they're in the downtown concentrated areas, and some areas are better served with on-site, private systems, and we seem to have the right balance. But as Patrick would say, this is a very small site. It's looking at sort of relative dense use, and this is the kind of candidate that works for infill. So hopefully that answers sort of the brackets of our wastewater. But I'll have a plan for you at some point. I just don't have it readily available.
No, I don't need a plan. You answered my question. Thank you. So is it safe to say that if this property did not have access to tie into the sewer system, it would really be an exception, because pretty much everything else does have access, and that's this area of West Concord?
That's right. You couldn't build this on that parcel without municipal sewer.
Okay.
David?
And I think you also addressed a follow-up question I had, if you don't mind, is if this was strictly a multifamily building in some other part of town, because that is what you're adding on. You're adding the residential on to what was already approved. If this was a multifamily building in another part of town, it sounds like your answer earlier was that it would be a case-by-case basis. One, is there sewer there? And if there is, does it make sense to tap into the sewer, or could it support its own on-site system? Is that correct?
That is correct. We go
Okay.
through all that vetting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Patrick, you didn't mention, I think there's a affordability component of this as well. I don't know if you mentioned that or not.
Thank you. Yes, so 25% of the 8 units will be affordable. You know, part of the major goals of the Concord housing production plan is to increase affordable housing and also different unit types, to have a variety of housing options for folks in Concord. So this project's been viewed as a part of a way to accomplish those goals.
Yeah, David, go ahead.
Helen, and Patrick, thanks for a very thoughtful presentation. As I work through the materials, the pre-meeting materials, which are very thorough, can you remind us sort of, and I don't want to put you or your team on the spot, but of your own assessment of this? Does this request, how does this fit with the master plan, and what Patrick's asking for? Is this a safe range? Are you guys saying we recommend it? Is your team saying, yes, we think this should be approved? What's your take on it?
I think the answer would be yes. It's goes back to the case by case.
Yep.
And there's a scenario, and it could have been 10 years ago, where we would have been at capacity and we wouldn't have this conversation. But we are managing the capacity day to day, and what we're saying is there is available capacity. With that said, we could accept this use. This is a part of the plan, because the comprehensive plan envisions lots of different components, including economic growth and development. And as long as that is consistent with the town's goals, and that's where Patrick had identified some of those other tenets that it met, we would not be in a position to say we don't have the capacity available. That's what staff would tell you. We're not in the position to tell you if this is in the community's best interest. That's your job based on the information. And generally, this is about as comprehensive a package as I've seen.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of work to get to this point, and this is what I would call friendly as far as being responsive to planning interests. And it does have sewer, and there were the criteria we used to review for the commission that were included in the memo. One is, does it have frontage? It doesn't require an extension to achieve this, so that's very important. As far as, does it fit within existing capacity? Yes, it does today. If that changes in 5 years, it would be a different response. Is the capacity of the flow going to influence our collection system or pumping system outside of the treatment plant? It's pretty de minimis when you consider the total volume, so that's not a constraint. And there's a criteria about public health and safety. Oftentimes that's for environmental or maybe a private well impact nearby or something. It doesn't have an adverse impact. And then ultimately, is a proposal consistent with the planning goals of the town? And that's where I think Patrick has sort of demonstrated how that kind of fits, and the buy-in from other town committees and boards.
So historically, we've looked at what other town committees and boards have done. So sometimes people try to do it where they ask for capacity in advance of going to the ZBA, in advance of going to West Concord Advisory. All the ducks here seem to be in a row, in the sense that they've gone to all the other boards, gotten the approvals that they've needed. It sounds like there's enthusiastic support in the sense of the unanimous decisions by those boards in support of the project, which would evidence that it is consistent with planning goals in the town. Here, I know from discussions on other items with housing groups in town, the affordable units that are of different compositions is a large goal that they're looking for, as well as walkable. Here, it's a unique site in the sense that it is actually walkable to services, as opposed to an isolated house or an isolated unit that still requires a car, still requires other things that then make it a little bit less accessible. It's a fairly unique site. I will say that we're probably not the only town that would balk at a one-story building where it was. So I do thank you for putting up with what must have been some contentious meetings before everything worked its way out. But no, I had a funny moment because I was thinking about this lot as I was going to, the last time I was nearby, it was in ice cream weather, and we sat in it. And I said, oh, this is really nice that there's a field right here. And then I looked up what it used to be, and I realized it was the old Chrysler parking lot with a fence around it, and realized, okay, this is an improvement. And then I saw the picture of the new plan and said, okay, this is better too. So it does seem to have all its ducks in a row from the planning perspective as well as everybody else. So that's generally what we look for when we see for wastewater appeals, that it's consistent. There's no health and safety issues associated with it. And as Alan says, there is capacity, and the town is looking for, the long range plan does have those calls for more density in areas that can support it. And this is certainly an area that can support it without changing the character negatively. Here it looks like this will be a positive improvement in the sense that it'll continue down the streetscape and is fitting with everything. So I don't have any other comments that, you know, it's in line with what we've done in the past for these wastewater appeals. That's all I'll say.
Thank you.
Casey,
Thank you for coming in, Patrick. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
right, Yeah. Okay. So no, I have no concerns with this. It looks like a great project. I think it's going to be an improvement for the area.
Thank you.
I just have to ask Alan, you know, like going to, because, you know, obviously Patrick's been through a lot, going through many, many steps. And, you know, would there have been some kind of a heads up if we weren't in a position to be able to accept this? You know, is there something in place for people in the future?
Yes, so
Great
again,
question.
the
Thank you.
capacity is the primary focus and interest of this board, or this committee, so commission. So it's wastewater capacity is what drives this bus. The complementing the town's long-range plan and planning interests, you know, that were identified after the CWMP, the Comprehensive Wastewater Master Plan, was developed. If you recall, if you go to the early 2000s, our wastewater plan was a growth neutral plan. And pretty quickly we realized, and this was with input from planning, select board, public works commission, from a number of interest, board of health, NRC, the community wanted wastewater growth neutral, and then realized, wait a minute, that's not necessarily what we want. So we had to revisit this plan and accommodate infill. So we've done it in a way that we may or may not realize the expansion that we had identified early on to some of these neighborhoods. But we've also, in the meantime, since the plan was developed, identified relief valves or alternatives to increase flow if need be. It'd be very costly, but we've identified a potential groundwater discharge site at the existing wastewater treatment plant, that if we exceeded a permit, we would need to go to the regulators and say, we've exceeded, we have a consent order to do something, but we've already started the planning. We're not waiting to figure out what do we do next. We already have the next step if need be, if capacity became a problem. So this commission is really focused on the wastewater flow. Does this fit the town's planning vision is why Patrick had presented the various reviews that they've gone through, the committees that they've discussed, the influences to get them to this particular vision. So for us, it really boils down to what's the flow to the wastewater facility. That's really at the end of the day, and you're looking at the other boards and committees for their support, and Patrick pulled that together in his proposal as far as that this isn't controversial, it appears to be friendly, and appears to be for the commission the kind of project that we do want to accommodate. Is that helpful?
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely helpful. I just, you know, can you imagine like at some point somebody, you know, goes through all this and all the other approvals are in place and then all of a sudden we don't, you know what I mean, to have capacity?
That's right, but very different if they're starting the process and we're putting them on notice that we don't have capacity. It
Exactly.
doesn't
So
come-
that's really my point.
That's correct.
Yeah, up, way ahead of the game. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly.
And some projects take a long time to develop. So that's
Right.
the other reason we can't commit to something 3 years ago because conditions can change. And then we have a violation with a federal permit. We already told someone we're going to accept this flow. So that's why it's appropriate at the end of the process is when we'd say, where do we stand? And I think Patrick was informed, if we ended up with a moratorium, all bets off. The good news is we're not in that position. And this is 1,000's interesting, just to let you know, why did the commission think 1,000? Most single family structures are not going to exceed 1,000 gallons a day. You'd have to have a pretty large residential facility. Commercial, you can get to that pretty quickly. And so that's where the 1,000 came in. It's the exception to the rule. We approve administratively many requests for changes of use, but they're for an additional bedroom or two or that sort of thing without a vetting of the board. So.
Thank you, Alan.
Seeing no more comments or questions, is there someone who'd like to make a motion? Andrew, sorry.
Yep, I can make a motion. So I, Andrew Boardman, make a motion to approve the appeal made by 13B Commonwealth LLC, the property owner of 13B Commonwealth Ave, parcel 2184-1-2 of the administrative denial of its requested increase in wastewater flow in accordance with Title V review number 20-166 dated January 4, 2021, with the understanding that it satisfies the recommendations included within the memorandum submitted by the Public Works Director dated January 3rd, 2021. This approval shall remain in effect for a period not to exceed 1 year of the date of approval, at which time a building permit must be issued for the project or an extension of the approval has been made in writing to and granted by the Public Works Commission.
Is there a second to that motion?
David DeLong seconds.
Thank you. Patrick, before I go forward, are you aware of the recommendations that staff has made in the report?
I don't know if I am.
Patrick, they're the same as Beharrell, similar, the same. They're based on the water impact assessment on water conservation to ensure that you're incorporating that into the final design.
Okay.
It includes the review of any changes in Title V as you develop the commercial site. So we do that incrementally.
Similar to how we do it with Brookside.
Exactly. It's within that allowance that is being approved today. If there's a need for a water service, a water sewer service, it's we call it a service agreement. If there's infrastructure, because I don't have a detailed plan of your utilities. If there's a manhole that we might need access to, that would allow us through a service agreement to have access in the future. And then it says payment of all additional wastewater allowances be due in full within 30 days of issuance of a new finding. So, once you submit the final review for different phases, you'll have 30 days to pay the sewer improvement fee associated with it.
Gotcha.
So it's similar to what we had before.
So you and I, Alan, have talked recently about the cost, the per gallon, the rate, I guess, is just to confirm what that is that the
$44 per gallon based on Title V, one-time fee. And yeah, I think that's within the finding that was issued to you.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that Patrick was aware of those recommendations.
Correct.
Okay, in that case, we're going to have a roll call vote on this motion. James Terry, aye. Andrew Boardman,
Aye.
David DeLong,
Aye.
Jeff Vassar,
Aye.
Casey Winslow.
Aye.
Thank you very much. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you for your time, Patrick.
Thank you all. Thank you, Alan.
Here.
Now, Alan, before we leave this, on your report, there was a mention of the possibility of work at the Grace site. So if you could put that on a future agenda to give the board more of an update as to what we would do at the wastewater treatment plant and what we would do at WR Grace and the cost of those kinds of things,
Mhm.
I think that would be helpful for us to put in our memory banks.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is a discussion of the winter maintenance issues with private ways. And we've been
Okay.
given a little bit of a memo on that. And Alan, is it going to be you or Aaron?
I will just sort of tease up. This is more kind of a housekeeping as well as awareness for the commission on kind of a standard practice. But I've been in, Concord for many years, and I've sort of peripherally observed or listened to challenges of winter maintenance along private ways. And in essence, because we have such a new team here at Public Works, wanted to review the practices and in essence, provide the commission with the mechanism of how we have the right to actually, what we can do on a private way. Not so much what we can't do, which is a lot, but a private way under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 6C, does provide an allowance for a town to use its expenses, the taxes, to remove snow and ice from private ways that are open to public use. In 1964, town meeting accepted that. It's not a requirement, but town meeting did say, yes, we want to extend that service, but with certain limitations. And so the memo sort of provides us with a little bit of overview of what those limitations are. But most importantly, what's very important is the private ways have to be maintained in a way that we can plow without damaging equipment, without having problems with emergency vehicles that need access. Because one of the considerations is a private way, not all private ways are open to the general public. And when they are, we need to make sure that essential services can be provided, police, fire can get through. But for us, Public Works, we found there's some challenges out there, and I can let Aaron speak to a little bit on the winter maintenance activities. I can bring up, you saw the memo. I'll bring up a screen. Aaron, I can have you share with the commission a little bit about some of the challenges. In fact, I'll bring up the, can you see the plan that shows sort of location of the in red? These are, is that showing up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we have over, I think it's 117 miles of roadway, public way that we are responsible for maintaining, and including maintenance that involves, repairs and replacements of the roads in the right of way. When it comes to a private way, our capabilities are much more limited. It's only to clear snow. That's the only authority we have. So, Aaron, are you want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you have? And I can kind of bring up a couple images if that's helpful. So first, to orient you, the red lines are those areas that are private that we maintain through snowplow. I will bring up an example of conditions that we are challenged with. Aaron, are you there?
I am.
Okay. So can you see those images? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron McCloskey. I'm the Highway and Ground Superintendent for Concord Public Works. So following up to the presentation in November, we have just over 25 private roadways that Concord Public Works maintains in the wintertime. So it's just over 4 miles. And in order to qualify to be a private road which is maintained by Concord Public Works during the wintertime, it has to meet specific criteria that were set forth at a town meeting in 1964. That information was provided in the packet. It has to meet specific criteria. For example, a pre-1995 layout, at least one home per 500 feet of frontage. The roadway would need to be at least 12 feet wide. adequate, and the big important one is for us is that there's a safe, adequate place for snow to go within the way. It has to be open to the public. The road is safe for the plow, and that's kind of what we're addressing tonight, this evening. And there's a hold harmless agreement signed by the abutters, and approved subdivision roads are not going to be accepted. So that information was provided in this packet. But what we're seeing on specifically 3 roads is what we're considering the condition of the road to be unacceptable, essentially, and approaching that point where it's not safe for us to send town vehicles and equipment to clear the snow from the roadway and de-ice the roadway safely without causing damage to the snowplow, potentially, a motor vehicle accident. So we've started to assess the conditions of the road. Like Alan mentioned, we have a newer team. This is our 2nd season with my current, management staff and assessing these roadways, these private roadways and condition. And so we've brought this up. The engineering group and Steve Duper have looked at these roads and kind of concur with our assessment that they are approaching that point of not being accepted to be part of this winter maintenance program. Currently, we are maintaining these roads in the wintertime. We have no plans this winter to stop maintaining these roads. I think that would probably be unfair of us to do in the middle of winter. But what we want to do is make the PWC aware of this policy, the condition of these roads, and that we are looking to move forward on informing the abutters and residents of these roadways that they need to start to consider taking some action as far as maintenance and improvements to these roadways prior to, I would say, next winter. Some of these roads you can see gravel, dirt that have some significant potholes that need to be filled in. Some of them were paved at one point, and the pavement is deteriorating. And a situation like that photo right there, where it goes from gravel to asphalt, can cause a serious safety situation for a plow operator operating a truck. The potholes on the photo below can cause situations where a sander truck goes down there. Those trucks are very top heavy, and cause a situation where the truck is starting to list side to side, and that can cause damage to the sander, to the truck. And those are trucks that not only maintain the private roads, but also the public ways in town. We only have so many pieces of equipment on the roadway, and every vehicle is strategically placed and assigned to a route. And when one truck goes down, we have to fill that void with another vehicle. So this is just a general overview, and just kind of like Alan said, and I mentioned earlier, just to inform it, first step of informing the commission of the policy, that we're looking to take some action. I think most important thing, we want to work with the residents and with the abutters to give them adequate notice of our intentions, and work with them to provide advice and guidance on what they can do to get these roads back up to an acceptable level. But I want to reiterate, we have no intention of stopping winter maintenance activities this winter. We're in the middle of winter. I know how hard it is to try to find contractors to come in and mid-season when folks have already planned on and committed to maintaining other areas. So, but we want to, nobody's thinking about plowing roads in the middle of summer. Nobody thinks of it until we're hitting the roads with the plows in the middle of winter. So I think this would be a good follow-up to our last meeting's discussion in November about winter maintenance. So happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Yeah, Aaron, are there, and you've identified the 2 that are sort of like too far, that are obviously need to be addressed this year. Are you also planning to reach out to those streets that are 2 and 3 years away from being to this point, so that way they don't feel like you're dropping the hammer on them in 2 or 3 years? Or is this kind of one of these things that it's so labor intensive that you just got to try to keep up with it as it comes?
As of right now, our focus is on the 3 roads that we've kind of identified that are past that point. That is a good recommendation to kind of reach out to everybody, and maybe that's something that we do, this season or off season, just remind the residents on the private properties of their requirements. I also don't want to alert people unnecessarily, so I think we got to work with folks to identify. We can work with our engineering division to identify conditions and rank those. We haven't fully exhausted that. No, we don't really spend a lot of resources, engineering or my crew's time on private roadways other than just plowing them. So I don't think they haven't been assessed like other roadways, as part of our roads program in town. And I don't know if I can work with Steve on somehow doing that. These get brought to my attention by the operators who are operating the equipment in the trucks on these roads and encountering the situations, and then we follow up post-storm to actually do an assessment of the road with our staff.
Great.
Is there,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Casey.
Okay.
All right, David.
Is there any history, Aaron, or Alan, is there any history of the town working with residents who are on these roads in the past, getting them to repair them or to bring them up to standard? That's the first question. And B, have you floated at all with these residents about these issues, or will this be the first time they hear?
Right. So the history, David's a great question. It's not with this group. So that's why we sort of peel back the onion a little bit to try and understand what can we do? What are our limitations? It's very important with private ways, what we're empowered to do as staff, so we can't take taxpayers' money and start doing improvements and certain repairs.
Sure.
We're aware of that. I am aware that this has been a challenge in the past. I've overheard conversations. So what we wanted to do for this team is identify what's the policy, what gives us the authority to do what we're doing. And if we reach out and people ask, well, what are you talking about? We have a sense of it because it's a policy. We wanted the commission to be aware of it in the event that, these people haven't done anything wrong. They're going to be notified, and we will, kind of work with them the best we can. As Aaron said, it might be for an improvement that can be done over the summer. There's different treatments depending on. And so we're the best we can do is give guidance, but what we can't do is compromise town resources by providing the service. That's clear to us. So if the worst case scenario is we have to put them on notice that we can't continue to maintain, it becomes, because it's private, a responsibility for them to, bear. And I think that's sort of just a realization of the policy, and let the board be aware. In the event you hear something, our approach. So.
Well, am I right in assuming that because these are private roads, if there's any remuneration or fixing of them, that has to be borne, the costs have to be borne by the property owners, right?
Correct.
The town's not, we're not spending any of our money.
We cannot.
Right. So, okay.
There has been history, David, where the town has, through town meeting, provided certain authorization to spend monies or develop a financial plan of some sort that would then, through a betterment or something. But again, it's always borne by the private owners. Again, these are privately owned ways.
Right.
And just to follow up, we have not notified anyone yet. So this is the first kind of public communication we've done to address these roads.
Jeff.
Casey, did you have a question? I know you had your hand up earlier.
Thank you, Jeff. No big deal. No, actually, I was going to say what David had asked, because it was the same thing, of course, that came to mind. Because some of those roads look like they're kind of past the point of being able to just smooth it over. They look like they need to be redone completely. I mean, maybe not all of them, but certainly that one with that doesn't look good at all. That's a huge cost. So I would just think there'd be some kind, like, we're going to have to come up with some ways to have the town come up with suggestions and how this can be done. A lot of these roads are really small, tiny little roads with probably just a few residents, and could really be tough, I would think. Big burden. They may or may not even be aware at all. So anyway, that was it.
Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yes, thanks for the update and the information. Greatly appreciate it. And maybe it's in the packet and I missed it, but has there been consideration of, or we might want to consider what we mean as a collective group as the road is safe for the plow. Because we may go to owners along a couple of roads and say, this is really bad, which we all agree they are. And someone may argue that, well, we're not as bad as this other one, why aren't you going to that road? It's kind of a subjective thing. If the phrase is just road is safe for the plow, I don't know if there's anything behind that item that puts some teeth into it by what we mean by unsafe for the plow.
So when we feel that something is unsafe, I guess, yes, it is subjective. That's why we bring in our engineering division to come out and do an assessment. We did engage Steve Duker and his team to go out and look. And like I mentioned, they concur. We haven't done and I guess Steve could probably speak to it better than I can, but we haven't done an assessment where we rank all of these private roads and give them a road surface rating, if you will, just because obviously there's a cost associated with that. And the town typically does not spend funds on private roadways. So we're addressing this on, I guess, a case by case, but I don't know, Steve, if you want to go into assessment.
And I mean, I'm defer more to you and to Alan and maybe Steve Crane, because you're the guys that may get the phone calls. But even if we had something as simple as what we mean by unsafe is excessive potholes, change in material, cracking of pavement that causes the plow to bump into something.
Yeah,
I know everybody's plate is full and it may not be a high priority, but it might give us a little something to fall back on.
Great. And in the there was a memo that was prepared by Steve Duker and sent to the commission. I think in the second paragraph it talks about some of the specific things where there's significant vertical drops. There's like you mentioned a pavement transition from asphalt to gravel and significant potholes. That's
okay.
Reading that out of the memo. But those are some of the examples that we've seen on these roadways.
Yeah, I see that now. Thank you.
But it sounds like staff is being proactive in that they're aware of the fact that there's an issue. If we can get to the spring and the summer when we're not plowing and we're doing other things, would it be possible to have a communication plan, if you will, to make these private ways aware of the issue? And following up on that, the hold harmless, as new people own some of the properties on these streets, they're not aware of necessarily what the procedures and criteria are for us to plow for them. If we could get some way to get to the town clerk or whatever, so that we know when one of those properties turns over, that there might be just a generic communication that goes out so that they're aware of the responsibilities that the town has taken on and not the other responsibilities that we will not take on.
Is there a decision here, Alan, that you wanted from us?
No.
You're just
I
informing.
think it's mostly an update for us, but to know that the staff is now aware of issues and that we're going to be working at trying to communicate and address the issues that are the most harmful to the equipment and to the operators.
And
Some of your comments are helpful. So as we move forward, it helps us think through how to proceed. So that's the purpose.
Can I just make one last suggestion? My suggestion would be, if I was the homeowner, to give people in the roads you see going the wrong direction a 2 or 3 year notice, heads up, saying, look, we just want you to know, here's the state of your road. And a couple of these roads, it'll have to be shorter term because it's a budgeting thing for a family thinking about, we're gonna have to it's like putting in a new septic system, right? Or something. It's gonna be a big chunk of money for these individual owners, to give them a little bit of planning so they don't feel blindsided by it. And then showing them, look, the reason we have to have you do this is these are the costs to the town if you don't. This affects our plows, so they understand the business costs, that we're not just doing this because we want pretty roads to plow, that it really has an impact on the town at a larger level. So that would be my recommendation, would be approaching these people, getting up courage to be in touch with them as much a personal level as possible, saying we have to talk to you about your road and plan and get you planning ahead of time. And maybe you could provide can you provide an a consulting service saying, here are your options, or here even, are you allowed to legally even provide a list of resources of people they could go to get road repair? Would that be legal or
We'd
not?
be coaching and sort of informing them of alternatives. You know, our
Yeah.
interest is to help and support as much as we can
Yeah.
with, when you get into full design and construction,
No,
that's
no.
a different issue, and that's what we're sensitive to. And I understand you're not asking, but for
No.
clarification, again, they're private for a reason. You know, they're, you know, and there were benefits of maintaining them as private,
Right.
economic benefits for the abutters. So
Right.
that's part of the reality.
Okay, thank you.
Casey,
Yeah, so, and also it is, you know, certainly commendable that the town was willing or has been willing for so long to be plowing those roads. So just want to say that too. That's all.
okay, seeing no other comments, I think we're done with that. Thank you, Aaron and Alan. Alan, I think we've got some general fund capital planning information for us.
Yeah, so included in the packet, this is something which generally we like to keep the commission aware of some of the larger, we're in the budget planning process for the general fund. And just a reminder to this group, Public Works has a number of different divisions that are supported through general fund monies. It's highway, grounds, parks and trees, engineering group, cemetery. They're all supported through general fund. At this point, working with the town manager and finance director, they have their first ask as part of the large, you know, multi-month planning review process, requested a 5-year plan through Public Works for the larger capital investments, and both debt and what would come from the cash. We've presented repackaged the memo that was sent to the town manager, who's on the screen, and finance director. And I just wanted the board to be aware of the sorts of funds we're looking at, the scale of them. This is not final. This is a request, and the town manager, finance director need to work with the finance commission on right sizing it in comparison to what they see as revenues, you know, that are coming in from the town. We are aware with COVID impacts that, you know, kind of the local and state funds may be more limited. It's a little bit of a uncertainty as far as what we can do to project how much money we have for Public Works. But basically, I wanted the board to be aware of the sort of ask we have on the capital side. We're in the process of developing our operating budgets as we speak. But these are the bigger ticket items, and really I didn't have a plan to walk through them. But I just thought if the commission had any questions, you know, we could answer kind of why we're asking. But you know, there's no, I didn't plan on walking you through it. Just it was more for information purposes. And if you had questions, you know, we're willing to entertain. And we'll be advancing this through the process with the town manager, who's on. If Stephen, I don't know if you want to offer anything, you know, to the commission, but it's more of a courtesy heads up of some of the larger capital. And again, we're in a 5-year. We asked for specifics for FY 22, and we provide sort of a 5-year at least budget plan that's helps inform sort of the town for the broader interest. And I understand from the town manager that we are now being asked to start looking at up to a 10-year plan, which is something which is new across the town. But this is Stephen Crane's sort of instruction. And I think I've talked to staff already, and I think we're all on board because it's a good way of planning. We've been doing it on water and wastewater. We're an enterprise fund. So we're used to this 10-year horizon, but this is new for the general fund. So, Stephen, I don't know if you want to talk to that item, but I think that's in keeping with sort of the broader town interests. It's
Yeah, I mean, I don't appreciate you blaming me for the 10-year plan. It was a charge from the capital planning task force, Alan. Finger pointing is gonna get you nowhere. So first of all, thanks for giving me a chance to speak here tonight, members of the committee, of the commission, I should say. And so I guess I would say a couple of things on that. The first is Alan is right. We are really, there is a capital planning task force that's focused on what they call tier 3, which really is very large projects. We've defined that as 5 million or 5 million as a single project, or a project that's phased with any phases with phases combined over 5 million. But part of the charge of that committee is to really start looking at capital planning from a 10-year perspective. As an aside, there is limited utility in years 6 through 10. It really is more like you were just talking, like your discussion about the private streets. It's more, here are some things that we know are on the horizon, and I guess I would use, if you'll pardon the expression, a wag on what those things are going to cost us in the out years. So I guess I would say that that is something that is evolving as we go. The other thing I would say about the capital improvement plan, as the board, as the commission knows, there's two kinds. There is what we call pay-go or cash capital, which is 2% of general fund by policy, 2 to 3%. And then there is non-excluded borrowed or debt capital, which is 5 to 7% of general fund. So basically, cash capital that we use appropriation to pay, and then another set of projects that we borrow to pay, but borrow within the levy limit, not excluded from the levy limit, like you would do for a school or a larger project. So, the town meeting vote and then the ballot vote, those are excludable debt projects. What we're talking about is within the levy limit. And FY21, the FY21 budget reduced both cash capital and debt capital because of the impacts of the pandemic on our budget. Predominantly, state aid was held harmless, but we wanted to make sure that we made some reductions in our budget. So the drop in FY22, which we expect to be more significant on the state aid front, was not so much greater than where we were coming from. So we reduced FY21, and candidly and disappointingly, we anticipate not being able to, well, let me say this. We are going to look at the policy percentages that are called for, the 2 to 3% and the 5 to 7%. I don't know that we'll be able to meet those percentages with our FY22 budget. And we are painfully aware that deferring capital expenses is just a bad idea all the time. Deferred capital has never been a good idea, and it never will be. But I think we just need to be realistic about the impact of the pandemic, which is a short term. I think broadly for the town's budget and the town's fiscal situation, I do think it's a short term, a few years, and that I think once the economy and our town budget recovers, we'll be back to fully funding both debt capital and cash capital. So that's not great news, but it is it's where we are today. I also, Mr. Chairman, I do have a non-agenda item, more of a PSA, and I'm happy to hold on to it till later in the agenda as well. But I just wanted to make a request for that.
Jeff, you had a question?
Yes, thank you for the information. And obviously I'm new to the process. I understand capital planning, but I'm new to the process of how Concord handles it. And I know, Alan, in the past, you've talked about our town's success in getting grant funding from the state. Complete streets, sidewalk improvements, street trees, things like that. Do you take that into consideration when you pull together your capital plan, with the thought that matching funds sometimes makes grant applications more attractive to the state? Or is that handled as a whole different request for funding at the time a grant application opportunity comes forward?
I wouldn't say they're completely dovetailed, but we do try to stay abreast of those opportunities that are coming down the pike. I know the success we've had requires some planning. For instance, the Complete Street, we had to go through a lot of work to get to the point where we're eligible for that, up to $400,000 of grant. At this point, I think what we're looking for, and I think the discussion with the senior group in Public Works is people are new to their role and position. We're in a sort of entrenchment of available funds. This is a good time for us to really start looking at planning and understanding what the needs are. I know the engineering division is in a position where they have, some technology software they look at to evaluate street condition. I think this is the time where we start pulling together our longer term plan. So we actually have a program, and we may look at not just going year to year with a roads request for debt, but maybe a 10-year plan, so we can actually spend money sooner rather than later to not have that lost sort of deferred cost problem. So I think that's what the team is up against. I think we're realistic. I think it's a good opportunity for us to understand really the big issue is roads. That's ultimately when you look at our general fund challenges, how much money do we have to put in the roads? If we can do repairs, replacements, it's less maintenance. Less maintenance is less cost on, sort of the highway ground. So it's our job to pull together the needs, explain it to the community, make our case, and look at stormwater systems while we're doing that, because that's sort of a different regulatory silo we're now challenged with. We do look at the water and wastewater infrastructure at the same time. So we try to integrate these things, but I do think we're in a position where we have to be realistic, but we need to start developing a strategy. And I think that's what we're going to be doing over the next year, more than spending capital, with an outcome that we can convince people that, these initiatives are important and need to be funded.
I don't want to tip a strategy or tip our hat to Mr. Crane, but if budgets are approved, obviously on a yearly basis and a 5-year projection, and if you're fortunate enough to get some grant money, I'm hoping people like Mr. Crane, and I'm saying this jokingly because Steve and I go back a while. He doesn't want to take money away from us because you've been successful in getting grant money. I guess I needed to clarify, Steve and I go back for a while, so.
We do, and Mr. Crane is my dad. And so, no, I think, we do look at grant sources and funding. A lot of times it's what's the local match, what's the scope of work, and we do want to don't rely, I should say, but we do want to take advantage of all those opportunities, and that is definitely in the mix. And not necessarily in Concord yet, because I'm still relatively new, but I have had situations where we elevated a project on the list of priorities because of funding availability through grants, not necessarily because of condition. Not all that often, but there are times where to take advantage of a grant opportunity, you need to do that. So
great.
That is, as far in terms of, is that on the table as something we consider? Absolutely.
Thank you, Stephen.
Not seeing any other questions or comments, Ellen. Thank you for the brief update. We'll wait to hear what happens at the next round.
There you go. Great.
I think our director's report is next.
Sure. This is the opportunity to hear from some of the other program managers. So I'm going to share a screen. We're going to go through a presentation, and I kind of asked everybody to be as brief as possible, with an opportunity. There's a lot of information in our packets that you get on a monthly basis, and if you have questions, you'll have an opportunity to ask. But so with that prompt, I'm going to start with Melissa Simoncini to talk about our solid waste and recycling program. So are we on screen? Can you see?
Yes.
Okay.
I can.
All right. So with that said, Melissa, are you available?
I am available. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Simoncini. I'm the Environmental Services Program Administrator one of my many responsibilities is management and facilitation of the town's solid waste and recycling programs. You can see here over the last 2 weekends, we've collected well over 1,000 trees, which Park and Tree crew shred on site. And we even help the Boy Scouts with a local fundraiser where they run around town and collect trees from Concord residents and bring them down to the site for recycling. Next slide.
Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah.
All right, and we have also collected over 200 bags of styrofoam on site that will be shipped off to Framingham and turned into crown molding. So this Friday and Saturday will be the last days that the compost site is open for the season, and we will reopen for yard waste in April. Next slide. And then we have the big nugget, the Curbside Program. We'll be providing a larger update next month, but we just wanted to give you guys a quick overview. And this time last year, we were talking about our plans to secure a new long-term contract, and I was even getting ready to getting ready to go on a ski trip to Colorado. But priorities quickly changed as COVID set in, and over the next month or two, our focus really shifted to our continuity of operations plan and just being able to really ensure that curbside service was maintained and uninterrupted. And then it shifted to program adaptation, trying to continue our recycling programs and our hazardous materials management programs to still allow for residents to safely dispose of the items they couldn't put in their trash or recycling bin. So right now we're working on more of a short-term contract or a short-term agreement for the next year so that we can develop a more comprehensive long-term scope of services where we can get a good understanding by working with the state, surveying residents, and working with the different hauling vendors to create a competitive contract to really get, have a good value, have a contract and services that the town of Concord is really proud of. We've had a long-term 10-year contract that the residents really believe in and have been proud of, and it has been focused on, or has been even featured on a statewide level. So, while we have, a short-term agreement for the next year, we'll be focusing on kind of long-term contract development over the next year. And then next slide. And then we have cardboard. This is just a quick photo of what some of the cardboard management looks like at the CPW campus. A lot of people are shopping from home now, and we've actually seen a doubling in the amount of cardboard that we've seen on site. And we have a series of dumpsters on site that are emptied almost every single day of the week except for the weekends. This increased cardboard and demand has led to increased cost, in the nature of $25,000 just for this year. And then, with the new agreements, might be close to $50,000 for next fiscal year. So it's more of a heads up that this is a large increase in funding, and it's a separate thing. So the Curbside Program is an enterprise fund, and that's a service that the ratepayers pay for, whereas the cardboard service is more of a service that's available to everyone in town. So more of a general fund item. So we'll be struggling with that over the next year to figure out what our priorities are and how we effectively manage that given our budget restrictions. And happy to take, do we do questions now in this realm, or do we do questions later?
Jim, we didn't have a separate call out for the trash recycling kind of pre-hearing, but this is a good opportunity if anybody has general concepts or questions. We'll be bringing a full presentation forward, but I don't know if you're interested in, we know this short-term agreement's going to cost money. We don't know the details of that, but we're talking about potential increases of 10, 20% to curbside customers, something along the order of $25 per cycle. You know, we have 2 cycles a year. Still be competitive, but not as competitive with some of the other service in town. But we will be talking about the value, some of the extra things we offer. But it's a pretty significant change where we're going out of a 10-year agreement contract. We're in a little bit of a no man's land right now, with the goal of entering into another long-term contract, which is going to allow for appropriate investment from the vendor as far as equipment and resources to get a return on that investment over a period of time. For the 1 year, it's a little bit of a anomaly. So we'll provide more information, but I don't know if the commission has any questions at this point.
I don't see any. Oh, David's got one. And then Andrew.
You may want to defer. You may want to defer your answer to this, Melissa and Alan, but at some point it'd be great to hear sort of how has the market changed? We keep hearing about the changing market for recycling, cardboard, and particularly plastics, right? And I don't know how that's figuring into this. I assume it's a factor. And by the way, if you need extra storage space, you can use our garage for that cardboard because we got plenty of it in our garage. I'm afraid
You don't want to offer that.
No, I don't. But I can understand the whole idea of more people shopping. I mean, because our garage it's coming out of our garage. But seriously, about the market, and you may want to talk about this at another meeting. I don't want to tie us up now, but it would be really helpful to know sort of what are the potential costs and long-term options for a town like Concord.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's, we hear a lot about recycling market changes. And when you look at the overall cost to the program, it's kind of, there's some interesting nuggets there, and we can definitely dig into that next month.
Okay, thank you.
And my comment was along those lines. Even though it's kind of older news in the solid waste field, the Chinese shield or the Chinese sword, whatever it's called, and the impact on the market, how Concord was able to avoid some of the problems because of the 10-year contract. But now that the contract is up, we're now absorbing those. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about large rate increases and stuff like that, it's worth just reiterating that even though it's from 1-2 years ago, it's still having a ripple through. And it's a market type discussion as well. But it's just
absolutely. And I think it's kind of interesting. I think that now that things have settled out a little bit from China sword, we have the market's still really changing and altering itself. And, they're even doing simple things like, while they're not accepting all of our recycling in China, they're now processing it here and sending the processed materials over to China for manufacturing. So it's just interesting that, there's been kind of these incremental differences. And I think we may actually benefit from, having this weird interim year.
Good.
A communication to the community might be a good idea. An article in the Concord Journal, and maybe showing that picture that you showed us of the overflowing cardboard containers that are replaced very frequently would be a help before the hearings next month.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll look into that definitely. Thanks, Jim.
Along with David's address for supplemental storage.
Yes. Well, we won't use the word managed. I think it was mismanaged. It was the image. It should have been the caption. But anyway, we can move on to, I think, the engineering group. Steve Dukran, welcome. I'm going to share the screen again. And let's see if we can't go from, do we have the, okay, there we go.
Okay, thank you. I'm Steve Dukran, a town engineer. This photograph is of the Cambridge Turnpike Improvement Project. Before we get into the photographs, because you have a few of them, wanted to let the commission know that the work over the Crosby Culvert area was completed. and the road was open to traffic on December 24th. And so this first photo shows a repair being done right at the museum. It was a repair to some puddling that occurred, and a patch was done, and we'll be infrareding it in the spring so that the joints was maybe disappear. That's what we're hoping for. This next slide shows. Often when we do road work, you change the road profile, you affect the slope of people's yards, and therefore you have to repair those slopes. So this shows adding loam at the site. We also had some utility services that went through to the homes, and so we had to do the repair as well. This is back down at the Crosby Pond where we had work done. It shows a sidewalk area where you have guardrail to the left of the sidewalk and a wooden pedestrian rail on the right side. The sidewalk area has been prepared, but it hasn't been paved because we ran out of good weather. That'll be done in the spring, along with the final paving of the street. And then this final photograph of Cambridge Turnpike is showing that when we just bind the paved down at the pond area, and the striping there is temporary. We'll be back again in the spring to final pave and final stripe. We included this photograph of some guardrail up on Nurse Hill Road. It shows the deteriorated guardrail that doesn't do the job. So we have a replacement project. That project has started and will be completed over the next 2 weeks. We occasionally will receive capital funds, like cash capital, as it was being discussed earlier, to address roadside safety issues. So we try to do this on an annual basis. I believe that's the end of the engineering slides.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. Are there any questions from the commissioners? I think we're good, Alan.
Okay, great. We'll
I
move
had a-
on.
Sorry, I had a question, sorry.
Okay, I didn't see it. Sorry, Jeff.
That's not quite all right. I think it's under this category. You talk about the plans are done for just full disclosure. It's my neighborhood, so that's why I'm asking. The Prescott Road area for that neighborhood for the repaving. I see the plans are done and going ready to go out to bid. Are you doing full depth reconstruction, or is it mill and overlay, or does it matter? Maybe it varies section by section?
It's for the most part, it'll be reclamation, which is essentially a full depth reconstruction. But there are sections that'll be just milled and overlaid that didn't have a lot of tearing up of the streets for the water main.
Yep. And part of the reason I ask is, now that my neighbors know I'm on this commission, there are questions about some of the puddling that occurs. I'm on Arrowhead, which is relatively flat, and it seems as though the puddling is occurring primarily at the end of driveways, and I'm not looking for any special treatment. I just don't know if there's anything that was thought about regarding regradings to eliminate puddling, because certainly at the end of driveways, it's the most, annoying part. That's where people will notice it the most.
So the streets that are going to be reclaimed, we have the opportunity to change the grade
Okay.
to address most. I wouldn't guarantee that all will be taken care of, but by regrading the streets, we probably will get rid of most of those puddles.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, now I don't see any more comments. Go for it, Alan.
Okay, great. We'll move on to highway grounds. Aaron McCloskey, are you back and available to walk us through your group's work?
Yes, sir. So the first photo is the landfill site. Two of our parking tree specialists, one of our chippers and our chipper truck, and they're chipping Christmas trees. This site has been running for the last few weekends since the Christmas holiday, accepting used Christmas trees as Melissa mentioned a little bit earlier, as well as styrofoam, Christmas lights, and then our usual compost and brush drop off. This will be the last weekend that it's running, this upcoming Friday, Saturday, and it will be closed for the remainder of the winter season, reopening in the spring. This is a photo of the Doug White Field up behind Concord Carlisle High School complex. This synthetic astroturf field is maintained and operated by Concord Public Works. And we had a request from the high school athletic department to plow the field in the wintertime to allow for modified MIA sports seasons that are taking place. So there's a number of student athletes that want to use this field throughout the wintertime. So we are plowing this. We have purchased a new turf plow to use on one of our tractors. We're also exploring some possible equipment that will help us complete this work so we can extend the playability in the season for the student athletes. It's a multi-use field used by a number of organizations, both the high school athletics as well as some private organized sports groups. So you can see kind of during the storm, and then in a couple of days after, how quickly it melts.
There was a storm.
Yeah, so that was the day after the storm, and then this is a couple days later. This is we completed just before the Christmas holiday overnight snow removal from the business districts, where CPW staff came in. We utilized contracted equipment as well as CPW equipment. This is actually a Great All and a Lazaro paving contractor supplied piece of equipment, clearing the sidewalks. Completed this on Main Street, the Row Depot area in West Concord. You can see a loader here loading some triaxle trucks. Basically, it's a very fast-paced, complex operation where we actually have heavy equipment removing the snow from the sidewalks and banks, windrowing it into the middle of the road, using loaders to pile it up, and then hauling it off-site to our 2 snow dump sites with trucks. So it takes about 8 to 10 hours, depending on how much and how far we want to go. But it's very efficient. We got a lot of positive feedback from the businesses and from residents for doing this. I think it's a great initiative and a service that Concord Public Works provides to the town, kind of well received. So.
Okay, I think that's the highway grounds. Any questions on the report you might have for Aaron?
Oh, I don't see any.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. Okay, so then we'll go to John Rogers, Water Sewer Superintendent. John, if you're available, I will reshare. So.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hey, Jim.
So yeah, just go through a couple of quick slides that show the first 3. I'd like to just talk about the sewer pump station work, construction work that's ongoing. This is actually at the Lowell Road pump station right next to or as part of the Public Works sort of campus area. This is actually the removal of the lid from an old double-lined fuel tank that was out there that got removed. Was that just last week? How time flies. Anyway, that's part of that construction. One of the last pieces of sort of big work out in the yards at this and the Assabet pump station. We'll have a photo of that in just a minute. This is also a little bit dated. This is the generator for that. What's interesting to note is it's sitting here behind 135 Kais Road. And there you see the sort of planning and natural resources building between. The reason we had to put it over here is for historical preservation reasons for the old pump station and the like. So that got placed late last year, I should say. And it sits on what we lovingly refer to as Val's Temple. Val's our public works engineer, and it's up that height in order to get it out of the floodplain. So that's the next. If we could just jump, could you just jump one more? Alan, I'll jump back to this one to close out.
Yeah.
Now just jump one more. Sorry. Ahead. No, the other way.
Other way.
All right. Boop, 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 boop. Next one. There we go.
Yeah,
so this is the other pump station. Sorry, these just got switched around a little bit. This is the Assabet pump station over in West Concord. And what you're looking at on the right is the beginnings of new mechanical equipment and some old demolished equipment inside the station. Both of these are sort of a gut remodel, if you will, and changing really the way that they operate. And then, so that's on the Assabet pump station on the inside on that right, and on the left is the lid on the structure that is sort of the control structure for flows coming out of West Concord and some other sewer mains that get consolidated here and then go as a force main over to the Lowell Road pump station. So that work is well along. We're probably 2 months from substantial completion of the work, and then it's wait till a bit of better weather to do some trim, doors, windows, things like that on these both stations, and then do some site work, and we're all wrapped up. So all is going well. And Alan's just gone to the we had a water main break, almost more of a leak than it was a distinct break, which created its own problems. It was difficult to control the sides as we were trying to put a replacement in place. But this was over at Butternut Circle, and just one of those things that all systems face. We don't face that many of them per year. Actually, I probably just jinxed it badly, but in any case, our guys are quite responsive, and you got sort of the standard equipment, standard series of guys, and a trench shield there to have the guys safe when they're down working in the trench. But also behind, you see the Vector truck. And so they use that for excavation as well, and pulling water out. And part of the reason for mention that is that we're looking at a slide earlier that Steve talked about, the Nurse Neck Hill guardrail. That guardrail is going to be very close to a water main we have up on the hill. It causes us concern. We use that Vector truck to help to do the excavation for the guardrail posts to minimize the effect, minimize the risk to our water main for doing that construction. So we do a lot of that within the operations groups across all the divisions in all kinds of ways, but thought I'd just point that out as well. So I think that's it for water and sewer, the things we thought we would quickly highlight. I just mentioned we've got 2 construction projects also about to begin up at the Nurse Neck Reservoir as required by DEP, as well as over at Nagog Pond for the intake structure and some of the inlet pipe replacement.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Alan, for your report.
Mhm.
I think we're going to move on to the commissioner's comments, and Andrew Borderman has a brief presentation, and then we'll get to Stephen Crane, and then we'll open up to the public. So Alan, I think you've got some slides for Andrew.
Yep, I will get these started.
So this isn't intended to be comprehensive. The goal is to just get the committee aware of some other project that's going on in town and that they want us to raise awareness about, for lack of a better term. You can go to the next page. So this is all about the nuclear metals site in West Concord. This is 2229 Main Street. For those of you who aren't familiar, it is a approximately 40-acre site off of Main Street over near the town line of Acton and Maynard. And I guess it's Acton and Sudbury. The site was originally as the nuclear metals name suggests, a manufacturing site for depleted uranium rounds. That company has since gone out of business, and now the site is being cleaned up by the EPA and their contractors. Right now, they're seeking some public input related to potential reuses. So the town has been involved in the cleanup of the site, and it's being pushed up to a residential standard cleanup, which is higher than ordinary. The cleanup is going to cost somewhere in a range of about $250 million. And it's going to involve taking out substantial amounts of soil, as well as certain caps in different areas, and I'll explain that as we get in. But there's a reuse committee which was formed, which was designed to provide recommendations to the town for the potential reuse. The reason that the town is part of this is that there's no clear owner of the site at this point. Since Nuclear Metals went out of business and there aren't really any stakeholders other than the Department of Defense. So the town is in a position to take over the site. It's a little bit unusual in these reuse situations. If you're familiar with the Arsenal Mall in Watertown, that was a contaminated site which was redeveloped more quickly, in part because when these things are valuable and there's somebody who owns it, they're willing to push the project forward faster. Here, because there is no owner, the town is moving more deliberately and making sure it's cleaner. You can go to the next site, or next slide, Alan. So, this is again the background I just gave from 1958 to 2011. It was used for that, used for this. This is a very comprehensive slide deck, which was created for the purpose of giving a presentation to the select board related to ownership issues on the site. Effectively, the town has to proactively take control, which is why I'm going to gloss through a few of the slides that we don't really need that have too much detail. Again, this is a reuse timeline where we're giving feedback now in the 2020 period, 2021, the idea being that as cleanup moves forward, they can prepare the site based on feedback we give. They can't make site improvements, but if we decide we want it all natural, they'll plant trees. If we decide we need a ring road, they can facilitate that based on the road that's already there. You know, those kind of things, that it's a low level type of remediation for physical plant stuff. This comes into play for certain sites where reuse is really obvious. There was a site in Rentham, I believe, where it was directly across the street from a commuter rail station. So they said, we want you to put in make the site perfectly flat so that we can put in the appropriate stuff to facilitate building parking lot. And that was, that's how the site was reused. Here, it's a little more ambiguous. Alan, do you want to move to the next slide? You can keep going. This is all the reuse stuff. So so this is how and it's a little easier to explain using the map itself. So this is the existing site. You can see the Valley Sports Arena in the upper left, and then Black Birch is down to the lower left, and Minuteman Arc. Throw Hills neighborhood is on the right. So the C1 area is basically has to be natural. It's a very steep incline into a bog area. So the bog area is what's in the hash mark there. So that's C1 and 2. That's approximately 16 or 18 acres. Site B in the red is the holding basin. That's a severely contaminated area, which they use to hold chemicals. That has to have a cap, which will prevent any building on it, but it is available for parking and that kind of thing if that's something we so choose. D, the drainage area, there's an existing drainage hole area there which can handle site water type stuff like that for stormwater drainage and support. Again, it's a fairly steep, large basin which could handle it. The main discussion we have is related to A1, A3, and A4 on that site. So A1 is where the existing structure was. It's basically entirely flat. It had a large industrial building and it's about 9.5 acres. I've walked the site. It's substantial. If you've ever been to Doug White Field and you look around, it's probably twice the size of that. And it's ready for development. There's nothing natural about it. It's been completely disturbed. A3 has some remediation that's necessary, as well as A4. Those are sort of additional sites and areas that could be used for other uses. And then A2 is a backfill source. It's a large hill, which they said again, this is a part of the planning process. If the town decided they wanted to maximize development, it'd be a lot cheaper for them to take the backfill that they need when they pull out. I think it was 1,000 train cars worth of dirt out of the site, that it would be easier if they could pull some of it from A2. I can tell you right now, they've already approached other developments in town, including the houses that are going in on Main Street over by West Concord. I don't even know their address, but right by Fallow Library, they're putting in a large development subdivision. I believe they've already contacted them and are going to take their dirt too that they have left over from their site. So basically, they're just scrounging around to try to not have to ship it in from very far. So if you go to the next page, and the reason we're discussing this, I guess I should take a step back, is in the past, the town has identified a lot of needs, and this site provides, this would be the largest site the town has gotten possession of since, in probably, I think it was 35 years. The only other site that, the developable site, they've had sites that have been, conservation restricted and all those sorts of things. But this is on par with where the current light plant is over on 2A. It's the potential for large municipal use or something else. There's been some discussions about its use for DPW, in part because a lot of housing advocates saw the Kais Road site as really ideal for large-scale development of housing because it's close to the village center, it's close to services and all these things. One that seems to have gone away. I'm on the reuse committee, and that seems to have gone away in part because of discussions about how inefficient it would be to move all those facilities from the center of town all the way to the edge of town. In the sense that you're now 5 miles from the border of Bedford, you're 6 miles from the border of Carlisle. It becomes just a logistical nightmare to get these services out there. But other sources of other items that they're considering using include things like senior center, co-work spaces, all sorts of other items that are potential development sources. You can move to the next slide. And what we've been talking about is a master plan concept. The idea is that the A1 is pretty much guaranteed to be developed into something, and then the question is what does that look like? It has the ability to, you can add indoor mixed use spaces, housing, sports fields, ring roads. It has the potential for on-site septic to handle almost anything because of its size, education, conservation stuff. And this is just informative. The idea is to get other town committees to at least have a sense of what is going on with this site. As you hear things around the periphery, we did have some public outreach, but again, I think a lot of that went by the wayside with COVID. People kind of just, started to ignore those things. And if you can move to the next slide. So the idea is that, there's a couple of different variable things that could occur. These are just rough ideas to give people a sense of scale and give people a sense of what development could look like. Community centers come up a lot, not just a community center, the likes of which exists in the current facility in West Concord, for a senior center, but a senior center with facilities, function spaces, sort of, larger scale type things that might be wanted in the future. You can go to the next slide. So this is an example of East Boulder. I guess that the site is similar in size to what the town would be working with. So this was a good example of just how large something could be. Obviously, Boulder, Colorado is larger than Concord, so it wouldn't be nearly on the same scale, but it's just it was just a reference point. So the other option would be private commercial use, simply selling the property, or long-term leases, those kind of things. additionally, mixed use is a large emphasis. I know it's been, brought up. It's not necessarily that we would want a cluster of houses or fully municipal use, but the idea of public-private or, medical offices, retail, those kind of things are all possible. The time frame from this is very long, so we're just providing recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. And there's a nice long report you're welcome to read and give feedback on the town's website. So right now we're in the remedial design phase, providing specific cleanup issues. If you go up one slide, Alan, I can point something out that talks about the specific things. So if you see at the top of D on the map right there, literally right above the D, there's a straightaway, which looks flat. That was an artificial wall created by the nuclear metals to provide access to a small parking area. It's not structurally sound, and basically as part of their cleanup, the EPA would have to take it down to make sure that it's clean. We could have them put it back up, but one of our recommendations is to not do that, just because it doesn't do anything. But those are the types of things that they're looking at with related to site work. And if we planned on developing a 4, they could flatten it to a degree, taking some of the fill from there as part of their remediation. So these are just the kinds of things that are being talked about right now. And you can go on to the next slide. That's really so yeah, near-term recommendations and all these things are just general topics of discussion that the select board has actions they need to take, and broader engagement of the public and reuse principles and all these things. So that's sort of my presentation. I didn't want to go into too much detail because it's not necessarily relevant for this committee, but I did want to answer questions if anyone has them, as well as just, I can talk about anything. There's the draft report, which is, I believe, a very brisk 50 some odd pages, which has everything I just talked about in much more detail. The idea being that it's designed to be to inform and provide guidance to the select board of what to do with the site as it moves forward. So I'm happy to open it up to questions related to public works discussions we've had, or just any questions about the site in general to broaden understanding and that kind of thing. So
I'd just like to make a quick comment. I'm aware of the time, and so I'm very sensitive to not taking too much. I would like to get a copy of that presentation, Andrew. I don't know if I go to the website or where I go to do that. Alan knows this, but the rest of you may not. I wrote a book in 2004 called Lost Knowledge: Confronting the Threat of an Aging Workforce, and deals with the problem of losing technical, scientific, and managerial knowledge out of organizations. And I've done work with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and done research in the nuclear weapons industry. And I have, when you started talking, I pulled up notes on my computer from 2004, when I started doing some interviews around Concord with the crew. I don't know if you remember, some of you remember, this was the group, a citizens group that was monitoring that site. And my only concern, and again, this can be another discussion, another day, is to be a resource, to make sure we're thinking about, has there been continuity of knowledge around what's really on that site and what the risks are and what the cleanup has been in 20 years? Because the people who were doing this 20 years ago, where are they now? And I'm glad to be a resource in thinking about this, but I also don't want to be a problem, because there may be people who say, Dave, it's okay, we got it handled. But I don't want us to be making assumptions, particularly for the town that may be taking on risks. If we're taking over control of this site, that we may have missed something. There may have been some discontinuity back in 2008, 2006, where there's some knowledge lost. And when you talk about the EPA still needing to do things, what is the capability in the EPA in this area? What assumptions are we making about their resources in order to do this, continue to do this kind of work? Because we all know these government agencies have lost a ton of knowledge and capability. in these areas. So again, glad to be a resource on this, but this is near and dear to my heart. I'm not a protester about it. I just want to make sure the town is safe and making good decisions.
That's great.
Thanks. Yeah, Jeff.
Yep, Jen, I'll be very brief also. Andrew, thank you very much. I do a lot of projects like this, not from David's perspective, but on understanding the contamination and the reuse potential of sites. So I'm definitely going to read the report. And Andrew, Stephen, anybody, if you're looking for volunteers to help with anything, let me know. I'd be happy. These are the recycling of sites like this are very of a lot of interest to me.
Great.
Great. Seeing no other comments. Oh, Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, Jim, thanks. So I guess, Dave, to your point, we got it covered. So I think, and Andrew, you can, I think your involvement with it is, I think you did an excellent job on the presentation based on the presentations I've seen, but and Jeff Vassar with his experience on brownfields can tell you that there are documents that go along with the property that forever, quite honestly. And they also build in certain, they build in certain physical, barriers or certain physical attributes to let, whether it's snow fence or certain types of barriers where if you're not aware and you're digging, you hit something and it's a cue to say, oh, maybe I shouldn't be digging. And there's a long way to go between the completion of the cleanup and the town's, I guess I'd say the town's willingness to accept ownership of the property. And there's a lot to sort out there, but we are aware of those issues. There's two great committees, the 229 Main Street Committee and the NMI Starmet Reuse Committee. And then of course the EPA has a contractor, I think it's
Maximus,
yeah. Who has spent a lot of time here, and is, like I said, those who are involved. I did brownfields in a previous life, and those firms stay with it for a long time. And like I said, the documents stay with the property, and it's the documentation that it's like a deed of a house or something like that. It really falls on there. So I have confidence that once they have the site, the remediation, I have confidence that the remediation plan is good and that it will be secure. And I also have confidence that the town will be eyes wide open before making a decision on ownership. The only other comment I'd make on that report, and Andrew, I don't know if this is consistent with what you may have heard, but when I got here a year and a half ago, when we started talking about this, it is really not good operationally to have CPW all the way out at the edge of almost in Acton, where I'm sitting right now, because of townhouse renovations. But I think people look at the site on Kai's Road and think, wow, if we had all that land to rebuild housing, it would be great. But when you look at the setbacks and the floodplain and a lot of other issues, that site really isn't buildable to the level that you see today, especially if you're going to change use and kind of reconfigure things. And so now I haven't done the analysis, but I've done enough of it to know, I have enough experience with development to know that you're not going to get a great bang for your buck in terms of a housing project there in the floodplain.
Yeah, that was just something that came up during public meetings was, hey, we could move things here that we don't like where they are, because there's a benefit. And when confronted with basic facts about even how expensive it would be to build a new public works facility as opposed to renovating the old one, it became, well, I don't believe those numbers.
Yep.
But
so
it went. So it's just one of those things that as we went forward, I did bring it up with Rich Reen about potential public work uses, and the answer was there aren't many based on its location. That it's just too remote. You'd have dump trucks going up and down Main Street. They'd be at traffic lights trying to get across Route 2, and that's just to get to their plow routes. Yeah. Something breaks, all of a sudden it's not a 10-minute drive, it's a 40-minute drive trying to figure out how to get back.
Yep.
It's just
Yeah,
a-
no, it's
less than-
that's all right on, Andrew.
Yeah.
That's consistently my understanding as well.
Okay. I understand that town manager wishes to make us aware of another issue.
Yeah, I just, this is really kind of a PSA. You haven't asked, but since I'm here, I just thought I'd make a mention about vaccinations. We've been getting a lot of questions about it. In the context of this committee, I think people would say our public works employees, first responders, and in how DPH is defining that for phase 1A of the vaccine process, which we are starting a 5-town first responder vaccine clinic tomorrow
Okay.
at CCHS. That answer is no, they are not. And I think one of the things for for the commission members, but also the public, and if you talk to your friends and neighbors, please relay this if they don't know. The town gets its shipments from the state. We don't kind of go out and buy the amount that we want. We have to submit we submitted a request for a very specific amount for first responders, and that's the amount we got. And so DPH is setting the amount of vaccine doses that go to a community. They are establishing the batting order, if you will, and we are following that guidance. And so for people who may feel like because of the nature of their work or they may have a comorbidity, geez, can I get in line, or can I go up to the high school tomorrow and get vaccinated? It's no, and it is not a local decision that we have the discretion to make. So I just want to make sure people are clear about that. We are talking every single day about how do we get to phase 1B, 1C, phase 2, and on and on. How do we get the whole town vaccinated? I mean, that is the prize we have our eyes on. But as I sit here tonight, we just don't know enough to know what that's going to look like. And if you've been paying attention to how the state gives out information, it comes with a lot of short notice. And so as soon as we have, notification of how we're going to mass vaccinate our community, we will certainly broadly publicize that. But just for your benefit, it's just first responders, and that really is police, fire, EMS, dispatchers.
Great. That's a great update for us. Thank you.
Yeah, I will say, in all other ways, I do think public works employees are first responders in many, many other ways. But for the purposes of the vaccinations, it's not, they're not categorized that way.
Yeah.
The local decisions, we are first responders always.
Yep, completely.
Great. Are there any other commissioners' comments? Casey?
Thank you. So I was approached by a resident that wanted to give some feedback on Westford Road in Concord, off of Lowell Road towards Carlisle, and that there are no hydrants on Westford Road. And the last hydrant apparently is at 107 Westford Road, which is just about a quarter of the way down Westford Road at best, probably. So another 3/4 to go, there's no hydrants. And she just, she made a point that it is a public road and that, she's not looking for town water because they only are on well water. To give some feedback that it's something that she thought was really important for safety and going forward. So I'm sharing that.
Can I provide a little feedback? There are no hydrants because there's no water main.
Right.
And, I think we've had a number of conversations over the years to talk about the policy of what it would take to do a water main extension. And we've had a number of conversations with different residents. And to date, there's always been a conversation that if it were to be extended, it would be for the benefit and cost of the residents, kind of like a private way. Everybody who has frontage to water main at some point has had to extend main at their cost. That's a policy that goes back over 100 years. The original system was designed this way. So we can sort of talk about the policy at some point in detail, but the commission does review and approve any extension. But it's always been on a design and construction for the benefit of the private interests and at their expense. That's just, it's a longstanding policy. So.
So are there other private, public roads in Concord that are, you know, that long that don't have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are
Go there.
sections.
I'm sure,
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Down kind of Garfield Road area, and you know, usually it's the external areas outside of the downtown areas. You can see we serve 95% of the town with public water, and the areas that we don't, about 5% of the community doesn't receive it. It's usually when there's ledge, bedrock, low density. It's always been cost prohibitive to get water there. So that's why your friend has a private well. They don't pay a water fee. That's a good thing. They're kind of off the grid, but they don't have the same fire protection. When we had the issue up on large fire up on
Fairhaven Hill.
Fairhaven, that was sort of a result of a private area. We don't have public water up there, and that was a pretty significant you know, impact. But no, Casey, it's not everywhere in town, and there is a policy in place to extend if. And I think
Unfortunately, I'm missing a lot of this. Is everybody else missing it?
No, I think it's your internet, Casey.
well, I can talk to you offline as well, Casey. Just to,
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's just, I'm sharing, you know, public
Interesting.
information that I've been, you know, approached with.
I think the key thing is, and Alan touched on this, and I've heard this, you know, not just in Concord. Well, I pay taxes, and I think that the key message is property taxes aren't really related to the extension of enterprise fund services. They're two distinct and disconnected, if you will, things. So when people say I should have a hydrant because I pay taxes, that's not really, as Alan alluded to, that's not really how that gets done. So I just want to make sure that your friend is clear on that as well. We were just, I think Alan's probably reported on our conversation with the name of the street escapes me, but I know it begins with a P. What was the group we spoke with about utilities, Alan?
Oh, up Partridge Lane.
Partridge Lane. Yeah. So we had a conversation with Partridge Lane, and we just went through and said, you know, if all of you want to do this and are willing to pay the betterments, we can certainly explore this. And I think that's really the big issue.
So you are suggesting that she talk to her neighbors and see if they all want to get together and share the cost type thing? Is that what you're suggesting?
That is precisely what we're suggesting.
Okay.
And we have suggested that to people who've contacted the Water Sewer Division.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you probably already heard.
Yeah, I mean, this is an editorial comment. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. It's like private roads in that at some point in time in the past, and it may not even be the current homeowner, people made what is now probably proving to be a penny wise, pound foolish decision, you know, to either have a private way or not have water service extended. And now that there's another issue or maintenance is required, it's, you know, it's unfortunate they're stuck in a kind of a tough spot, but this is not unique to Concord.
Well, this is a public road though. It is a public way, but for
that's-
some reason, the town at the way back when decided not to do it.
But it may have been that the residents on the road didn't want it and didn't want to pay the assessment.
Yeah, could be. I mean, it probably isn't all that dissimilar to what we just talked about on the private streets.
Very similar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
That unfortunately, especially the ones in the White Pond area, that's going to be tough.
Hmm.
Anyway, just passing it along. Thank you.
So one comment that I have, which is maybe toward Aaron and Alan, is that when I drive around the town, I sometimes see safety signs that are very difficult to see. And so I wanted to know if there's a policy or a procedure where if it's the policeman or the public works people, when they're driving around town, if they notice that there are obscured signs that would be appropriate to have clearing done near them, does it ever get back to the people who have the ability to put that into progress?
Yes, so we receive notifications kind of all the time about different signs, and as we observe things, we take note. We have a standing work order list, if you will, of signs. We complete sign maintenance throughout the year and kind of just fit it in the schedule with everything else that we are doing. So if there's specific things, Jim, that you see, please email me and we'll make sure it gets added to the list. But we monitor that. I think in years past, there was a sign inventory that was completed. That needs to be updated and kind of work through that list, and as well as notifications that we receive. So we actively kind of trim back obstructions in front of the signs. Sometimes we receive the complaints, sometimes the police department receives them, or our engineering division receives them. They all eventually get filtered back to Highway and Grounds, and we complete the maintenance within this division. So, and then if it's signs that are faded or damaged, same process happens, and we replace those as needed. Engineering will, if there's a large section of roadway or a larger capital investment and capital type project for sign replacement, engineering will spec those signs out, and those will be, for example, there was a project done this last year in 2020 where we did a large scale sign replacement throughout town that was managed through engineering, and we work closely with them on placement and location.
Great. Thanks for the information. Are there any other commissioners' comments? In that case, are there any citizen comments? I think Anna and Alan, you're going to have to help me.
Yeah, I'm looking and I don't see any. Oh,
No, I don't see any.
don't see any hands up. Oh.
Okay, in that case, I would accept a motion for adjournment. David? Can't hear you.
Unmute.
Sorry. David DeLong makes a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all those in favor? James Terry, aye. Andrew Boardman,
Aye.
David DeLong,
Aye.
Jeff Vasser,
Aye.
Casey Winslow.
Right.
Thank you, everyone. Our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very much. Great
Nice
job.
job, Jim.
Well
Thank
done,
you.
team.